Fascinating. Machine learning. Fascinating.
They can see us now too.
Hi, us.
Hi, us.
Hello.
No, we are being perceived.
Ah,
Quick engage stealth protocols.
Well, as you can tell by both of those voices, neither of those two non-pot against the machiners are Izzy. Also, who's controlling this portion? Because I'm still nose goes on this one, even though I'm currently talking.
I guess I can run it since, unlike you guys, I won't be playing in the 2E game later tonight. I'll just be kind of doing background AV stuff. So I won't be talking as much later. So I will go over. So as Zach insinuated, we do have two guests with us. We have Jeremy Corff, and am I pronouncing that correctly? Is it Corff? Or is it?
No, that's right. It's very simple to pronounce, just like it's spelled.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. And also John Curtin.
Yeah, not to be confused with World War II's Prime Minister of Australia. I don't think we're related.
Is it spelled the same?
It's spelled the same. I can try to import like a Curtin University like hoodie, but it seems like a little too much effort.
But the two of them are freelance writers who have done quite a bit of stuff with Paizo, as well as several other ventures on their own. And actually, you know what? Instead of me talking, I will let you two introduce yourselves to start us off, because you will do a better job of it than I will.
John, do you want to go first?
No, you just lost nose goes. You got to go first.
He's
Sorry.
got the nose.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I've been gaming for longer than I'd like to say, and have been writing for Paizo off and on for at least 5 years now. And addition to that, also done a whole bunch of work for Legendary Games and some publications on my own. Let's see. Most recent thing that's been announced would be I contributed to Battlecry, which is coming out next year.
That's right. And hi, I'm John Curtin. I started shitposting the Starfinder Facts account back in 2018, which led to me starting to do Paizo work in 2019. So we're coming up on 5 years of freelancing. I've got a good chunk of like the Starfinder First Edition hardcovers that I've contributed to. There's half of a Starfinder Society scenario out there. There's a whole Pathfinder Society scenario out there. With my name and madcap designs on it. I can't tell you what I most recently worked on, but I'm very excited to be able to. Coming soon, all my best work's under NDA. And yeah, when I'm not doing Starfinder stuff, I've gotten a couple of D&D third-party products out there. I helped contribute to one of the Transformers RPG books, which is pretty cool, a little different. And I'm really excited about second edition. I'm just going to put that out there. It's going to be awesome. It's making me learn the Pathfinder 2nd Edition rules way better than I have. So, yeah, really excited to be here.
For real.
For
real. So we are basically just going to kind of talk with you guys about Pathfinder and Starfinder, and maybe just kind of some generic TTRPG writing. I guess since I'm hosting, I'll start us off and ask the first question. And I think it's going to be the one that I've kind of thought of the most when I've tried to rack my brains for something to ask, is the ease or difficulty in writing things, especially as far as like the new playtest goes, with how integrated Starfinder and Pathfinder are now, that like something that's one kind of has to work with the other, and has that led to any kind of like anything that you've had to think of that you wouldn't have before, as far as like making things that are compatible?
Yeah, anyone, do you want to start, Jeremy? You have any
Oh,
thoughts?
sure. I feel like it's a double-edged sword. So on the one hand, it's nice to have so much ground already covered, so you can look at, well, how did somebody else handle this particular problem? So that can be quite helpful and make sure that you're, sticking to standards that are already set. On the other hand, you also run into the issue of, well, there's a lot of ground covered. So if I want to do something like this, I have to see, has somebody already done that? Is what they've done considered canon? I can't, change that, or is that something where there's some give? So, I mean, it's good, both good and bad. That said, even with as much ground as covered in PF2E right now, nowhere near as much as what was covered in PF1, when
Yeah.
any of us started writing for it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that I'm excited about is that because of the ground covered, like, so I'm sitting there, I'm like, ooh, Eox. I'm like, great, I'm just going to take the Book of the Dead and I'm going to give it lasers and it's going to be
Bad words.
fucking excellent. Like, it's perfect for that kind of... Am I allowed to swear? This is for the children, but are
Yeah,
the
no,
children
I love it.
here? Great, great.
The money is going for the children, but we're fine with kind of like
Kids,
high-level
don't learn that word. It's a
PG-13.
bad word. But yeah, like the ability, I think one of the things that I've really liked about the playtest materials too is how they're leaning into the magic side of Starfinder more. I think first edition was very tech heavy until they were making deliberate efforts to expand that. But I think that we're going to have one of the first adventures be really heavily invested in the ghost levels and that sort of occult like overlap. I think I haven't gotten a chance to dig into Empires Devoured yet, but I think the Sahedron Guard is bringing a little more magic to the Islanti Star Empire too. So we're taking the magic dial, we're cranking it up, and we're continuing to explore that space in between the tech and the fantasy. Sorry, my 15-month-old is screaming for my attention through the door.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely one of the things that I was more excited about Starfinder Enhanced. I maybe have some of the least experience playing Starfinder, but the little bit that I did, I played a Witch Warper. I felt like that class could have deserved a lot more love. I got implications around the playtest in Enhanced that it did. I did also want to quickly, because I had a similar question to Jero in the beginning. I did want to quickly ask before we moved away from that and into the kind of the magic aspects of this, is that so do you feel like it's more of an emphasis on compatibility with the engine of 2E than balance, right? Like those two things aren't necessarily thought about in like comparable worlds of balance of power as much, or is that being considered? Because I know that's a lot to like weigh on your shoulders. Like Jeremy sort of intimated there's nothing new under the sun was a big feeling in PF1E. So like in 2E, yeah, I guess I'm interested like how much of the bounds of like this has to stay within a relative power scale to what happens inside of Pathfinder governs choices that you've made, or if it's literally just compatibility of the base engine.
Yeah, because the base engine remains the same throughout. And I think that one thing that we, like Pathfinder 2E is, from my experience, a much tighter numerical system than both Starfinder and Pathfinder First Edition. Like, Starfinder said, okay, we'll put some brakes on, while Pathfinder 1 was just like, I bet you can get a plus 80 by level 1. It'll be fine. What's the worst that could happen? Look at a door, it pops open. It's easy. So with the numbers being tighter in second edition, I do feel like there's almost some of the pressure taken off, because I know that if I'm like writing a +5 bonus, I'm like, well, that's wrong. That's far too high. I've made a huge mistake here. And I think that because the numbers are smaller, it does make it easier for a developer to go through and say, oh, dear God, no, I can't release this into the wild, / and cut those things down. So I think that, and as someone who has spent a lot of time in Starfinder First Edition and is pretty new to the Second Edition engine as a whole, I'm definitely learning those sort of mores and rules as I go along too. So I feel confident that other people are more experienced in it than me and can sort of be like, John, No. If I really mess up, but what do you think, Jeremy?
I mean, definitely the same thing on the numbers. Like, I mean, you just know, like, if it's got more than a +1, I mean, I'm already pushing the dial pretty hard there. But in addition to that, I feel like there's also kind of a freeing element to that because, I mean, you're outside the realm of, well, this does a +2 to strength and +5 to dexterity. You know you're not going to do that. So how else do I make it interesting? You have to get more creative, and I think that actually adds to the game more than takes away.
I think learning a lot of the traits and a lot of the new conditions is sort of the direction that I found myself going when I've been working in the second edition engine. Because like putting those you're sticking for a round is a lot different than it is.
I do think that even though like the numbers are the same for Pathfinder second edition and Starfinder second edition, like the math equals out, the balance is different because the ecosystem's different.
For sure.
You have a lot more flying and you have a lot more range as like the default. Whereas being an archer in Pathfinder second edition is like, you know, that's a specific path to take, or a gunslinger or a ranged fighter or a blaster. In Starfinder second edition, like every character has proficiency with some kind of gun. And, you know, so everybody can do 1d6 fire if the chips are down at 800 feet away or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, you know, things are, and I think in that way, like the achieving the balance is different even when the numbers are the same.
No, that's definitely true. And for most of the classes, if you're in combat and you start your round next to a monster, you don't want to end your round next to that monster.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting to see like Sheeran get flying at level 1, where that would, like Sam referenced, and in a pretty like pithy way, that would completely skew the balance of power inside of PF1E, for example. Like even the funny times that I've played characters that had inborn flight, like a game that Jeff played, it can really throw power balance up to like level 7 or so. So yeah, that part is very interesting in terms of kind of seeing more of an emphasis on like gunfighting, like people had described, like at range gunfighting, like fighting at like, you know, if you're flying in the air, it doesn't matter if you have a gun that can shoot 200 feet per round nearly as much. Especially with, it seems like there's less of an emphasis on melee being king as it kind of was in SF1. I only say this because I got my shit rocked by a Dashko more than once. So.
Well, so I will say that goes both ways. Like on the one hand, you still can deal a significant amount of damage in the playtest if you go melee, like more than you would with a pistol, because you're getting a stat bonus, which you generally don't get with the guns. On the other hand, your world is going to get rocked on the regular.
Yeah, I started recently running a group where I just said, okay, chaos rules, you can use like any of the Pathfinder stuff. And so people are like, bring the exemplars and barbarians to the table. And I'm like, cool, so I don't have to pull any punches. And dear God, a Vesk barbarian with a Doshko is terrifying. It's like, I felt bad for the monsters. I was like, this isn't fair. So melee characters still very much draw a lot of attention on the battlefield when it's going on, especially because if they're already in position and you're like, oh, I'll roll with a -10. Let's look for that crit. And when it shows up, it makes a big impact. So.
Yeah, you might only stick around for a round or two, but they'll be glorious rounds.
Yeah. Blast cannon.
It'll be interesting to see like as more adventures come out, because I think I've only seen a couple of the maps so far, but like the range requirement of a lot of Starfinder weapons, or the like leaning into range both for monsters and characters, like seems to imply bigger battlefields, more space to move in, fewer 5-foot hallways, or you know, things can get really deadly in a 5-foot hallway in any game. But I wonder if it's even scarier in Starfinder Second Edition because you have the giant space blob that can do 2d12 plus 16 that you can't get around now, and you can't find a way away from it besides just like standing at the entrance of the hallway and hoping all your friends can keep you up.
Put your soldier in the doorway and just start hoofing.
I do think that there is an interesting point that you both touched on at one of almost kind of deflating the inflation that of certain systems that has happened between 1E to 2E. Obviously, the gold standard moving to silver is a great example of this, but both of you touched on this a little bit. But like Jeremy, you referenced, it was relatively normal for like, here's a +4 mutagen bonus to your strength and another +5 from this and something and something and something. And it does kind of get to that bloat that sometimes like comic book writers describe in a world where everything has happened in it. And you're just seeing these power levels kind of go higher and higher in an arms race. So what are you the most excited about sort of deflating in second edition? Kind of bringing, because I mean, a great example for me, for example, is like making the statuses much more intense than they were before. Mm-hmm. Like having statuses be a little bit more debilitating, certain statuses be a little bit more debilitating in Pathfinder 2E was really interesting to me. Like poison, for example.
Like it actually matters when you're sickened now or frightened. Like it's something that can actually affect a combat. Yeah. Even, like you said, even dazzled. Like when that -1 is actually important.
Yeah. I think the thing that I am excited isn't like the right word, because I like cut my Pathfinder teeth in a particularly depraved community that was like, here's gonna be my character, and when we're done with the game, I'll go through and do like the debrief on how many levels of like barbarian and the specific inquisitor like subclass, and like I have this one item that the entire build hinges upon, and that's why my fighter can hit people 20 feet away when he whirlwind attacks. And I was like, you monsters, you sick monsters. And the only time that I ever like went full on was I made an Oracle Bard Pathfinder Chronicler that like 90% of his character was powered by charisma. And so I'm just like, great, I'm gonna pump everything in. His like constitution is at 8 because now his hit points or charisma, God help me. Like insane stuff. And so like on the one hand, there's that part of me that's going to miss making these like very bespoke abominations for my games. And on the other hand, as a GM, I'm like, awesome, I don't need to know 50 books, and I don't need to like red flag if anyone shows up with something out of Halflings of Galeria and I have to like start pulling my hair out. Like it's all like much simpler as a GM to go, yeah, I trust that this is balanced, so sure, go ahead and do it. So that is the double-edged sword that I'm excited to have sheathed.
Yeah, it certainly makes balancing encounters much easier. I will say, like, speaking to status effects and things like that, what I like about the PF2E engine is that you can apply something like Sickened or Dazzled, and it will make a difference for that combat, but it also doesn't stick around. Whereas, like, if you're going to apply one of the statuses in Starfinder that matters, like, say, Radiation, you better be careful, because that is going to wreck somebody's whole character, maybe for the rest of the game, or they may just die.
That's a good point.
That actually is a good question. Having not done a lot of the playtest, are the diseases in Starfinder playtest still as brutal as they were in Starfinder? Because the disease tracks, the way they changed that from PF1 to Starfinder was by far like the biggest player killer of a lot of stuff I saw, was like getting a scratch from an alien plant, and like it's like, well, this character is going to be dead in 2 days and there's nothing I can do with it. Have they toned that down any, or is that still one of the more dangerous issues?
John?
I will be very frank and say that the affliction rules are one of those things where I'm like, am I actually dyslexic because I cannot like wrap these around my head? So I don't know. I can't tell you. I don't have that like in my head as a GM yet.
So I can tell you. All right. So poisons and diseases. Poisons and diseases in PF2E are bad. They're also very, very bad in Starfinder.
So no, they're just still as deadly.
Yes.
Still just
Okay.
as deadly as in Starfinder first.
Sure, just
And
don't-
in fact, like after the combat's over, if you've still got poison or disease, you might just not make it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is
Yeah,
fair
that's-
because
don't dump
in
Constitution.
Pathfinder first, or I mean Starfinder First Edition was like if you got diseased during a combat and you weren't lucky enough to have a way to cure that right away, you were kind of out of luck.
We're
the
gonna play,
persistent
like-
damage in PF2 is a character killer by far. You sit there watching your players trying to make that flat 15 and
Yes,
And feeling badly for them.
especially like a bleed saber. Ugh. Yeah.
Now, that said, Starfinder is a little more forgiving in terms of like how much healing you can apply. Unlike, say, PF2E, you have some options in terms of like spray flesh and things like that. So you can apply medicine multiple times. You maybe can save them.
Mhm.
Yeah, some of those technological solutions being able to just like stim pack, go.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think makes a tonal difference for sure. And I guess that makes sense between a sci-fi game and a fantasy game.
Yeah.
That actually
Yeah,
touches
because that's the thing.
on-
Like science fantasy it's gonna be more advanced. Like you said, it'd be unrealistic almost to have it be as hard to recover from something as in something that's like a pure fantasy.
I was actually going to ask, like, what is it like switching gears between, a lot of us do play inside. You can reference, like, some people describe it as a Tolkienian fantasy. Like, some people describe it as, like, a, pan-European, as it's expanded outside of being so Eurocentric. But, like, you know what I mean? There's, like, certain themes that are played within, but more importantly, it's a known quantity. It's a known sum. And now, of course, magic allows us to sort of augment that. But when you're writing speculative sci-fi, when you're not only dealing with how difficult it is sometimes to run real world powered by the apocalypse or D20 games where your players have access to the internet, that alone changes just in general the kind of power dynamic between characters and players sort of existed before that. How do you what do you struggle with, if you do at all? Maybe you are both just fantastic at this, but like, how do you deal with that sort of unknown quantity of like dealing with future technology, writing sci-fi style adventures in a world where like it's almost like there's a comfort that's given by the delimitation of form of like this is what's available and this is what's not available. But like one of the things that I guess blew my mind first playing Starfinder is I'm like, holy shit, I could just go on the internet. I could ask like whatever Starfinder. I could go to Stack Exchange and solve this problem in like 3 seconds. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, it is. What is that like for either of you taking that on?
Yeah, trying to like write against the convenience when you're trying to make challenges.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you go on like an alien planet, you're like, yeah, where's the Wi-Fi? Yeah, go ahead. Try that info search. You don't have the password. They've all been dead for thousands of years. And so like just I'm someone that leans into like very logical consequences when I'm trying to think something through, and I'm like, okay, if they're going to run into this problem and they can't get on the internet, what are some other ways that they might find their way around it? Because that's the other thing, is we can't just make it obstructionist. We also have to try to build a way for them to solve the problem. So sometimes it's as simple as, I don't need to worry about this because anyone with an int of 12 is going to like go on the infosphere and they're going to look this up and that'll be fine. So just kind of like leaning into it. And as we all know, there are still problems that like advanced technology doesn't solve. It has a certain limit to it. So then you just make whatever the problem is and you crank it up a little bit and you say, oh, it's magical radiation instead of just normal radiation because we're in a sci-fantasy setting. So it's hard. Good luck. And then, the challenge is out there. So yeah, just and that's the nice thing about a sci-fantasy setting is you get to pick from both. If magic is going to wreck this, you just go, okay, then we're going to lean into tech so you can't mind affect it, or just go sort of, if one doesn't work, you switch.
I'm
Yeah,
just gonna jump in real quick. Sorry.
No problem.
I just wanted to jump in real quick because we did just get a $125 donation, which means we have passed our initial goal for Extra Life of 500. We are now at $530.
All right, shut it down.
Just wanted
That's
to
it.
jump in
Sorry,
quick,
guys, everybody,
too.
we're going home. Kidding.
Yeah, thanks for joining
Promotions
us.
all around.
Appreciate your time.
Congratulations, everyone.
Yeah.
We're out of here. It's been real, everybody.
Yeah, can you drop the mission accomplished banner over all of this at this point? It just rolls down.
Thank you for
that donation. That's amazing. And sorry for the interruption. Just wanted to acknowledge that we just got that.
No problem. That's great.
Yeah.
That's how we're here.
Trying to recreate my thought process. Right. So what I was going to say, I mean, in a way, like, you know, in the pure fantasy setting, yes, like you can be sort of simpler in terms of the challenges, but also you have to remember, like, there are all these spells out there, and you do your best, but there's no way you're going to remember every single spell from every single tradition. There may be a perfect spell out there that would solve that problem that you just made. So, but the other side of that, and I did this in the Starfinder Society scenario I wrote, is sometimes it's just a matter of time. One of the challenges I put in that adventure was there's a kitchen fire. It's a grease fire. How do you solve that? The solution is easy, but you'd be shocked how many times players don't go for that.
Was that Gifts Ungiven?
It was.
Or okay, yeah. Play that, by the way, if you're watching or listening this. It's like a low-level Starfinder adventure that is holiday themey. Cool.
I hope it's fun.
I had fun.
We had a question from a member of our audience with the very name of Finder of Path and Stars, who was interested in knowing if either of you have heard if the PF2E stamina optional rules have been looked at much as far as Starfinder 2E, since stamina was such a big part of the original Starfinder.
I have not seen it it hasn't come up at my tables. Although we did have a lengthy discussion on it, and I was just like, I'm still learning the Pathfinder hit point rules. I'm not going to add the Pathfinder stamina rules yet. And one thing I've noticed is that Pathfinder 2 seems to just operate under the assumption that everyone's going to be taking more damage. Your casters are less squishy. Your big meat shields take more damage. And so the healing is kind of stepped up to meet that. Mystics, oh my god.
Yeah.
Like, so much healing comes out of a mystic. Oh. So with that in place, I haven't felt like I'm really missing stamina. And stamina, like, really changed the pace of Starfinder First Edition compared to, like, Pathfinder First Edition for me. Because you would get in a big fight, and then everyone's like, can we take 10? Can we please take 10? I'm just going to get myself back up from, like, half back to full. Whereas in Pathfinder, it's kind of taken the JRPG approach where everyone just, like, huddles up and slams healing potions and uses the healing skill until everyone's back to full. So I haven't missed stamina yet, but I also haven't, like, dug into it.
Kind of like that, like the whole thing of, like, stuff like you said, like the heal skill in that in 2E has kind of taken more from stamina in Starfinder than it did from any of the 1E types of healing. Like, it feels more like that, like taking the 10-minute rest and patching yourself up feels a lot more like the stamina system from Starfinder than it feels like anything that was in 1E.
Yeah, I think the big thing now that you don't have to spend any money to do this massive between encounter healing. I mean, it's something that grew out of Starfinder.
Yeah. Because I feel like getting away from, like, basically the happy stick healing was a huge portion of, like, 1E to 2E attunement, all of those ups and downs we had together dealing with that. But yeah, no, I think that, like, that emphasis on battle medicine, the heal skill in 2E that you will watch me botch using just in a couple hours. Yeah, I am definitely the least experienced in 2E that's going to be playing that game later. It's going to be great. But yeah, I think that's been a really nice move towards getting, like Sam said, away from disposable resources and sort of in a more meaningful way that you almost touched on, like you touched on, John, by mentioning JRPGs. I did actually have a specific question since we did reference Gifts Ungiven. I will send one directly to John. You had put some energy into the nanosite. Specifically, you want to talk about that at all?
I love nanosites. What specifically?
Like, what are you the most excited about? Do you want to talk about highlighting any particular contributions that you put towards it? Like,
so yeah, I got to dig into the nanosite when I was doing Starfinder Enhanced, and got to make a new faculty. Is that the verbiage? Am I mixing that up? I went full like the superhero trope of like absorbing different elements, because the nanosite was such a gonzo class, which I loved. I was like, oh, you're molecularly altering things with nanites, so you can do anything. And once I sort of got into that mindset, I was like, great, I'm gonna go wild. So it was really, really fun to get to explore what happens when you're altering yourself on like a microbial level and see what that does. I also have this thing where when I write something, there's such a lengthy period between when it releases and when it comes out, and I know that like developers are going to get into it, they're going to fix whatever I did wrong, and so my brain just sort of gaps it and like full wipes. And so then the book comes out, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. I can't believe I wrote this. And so, like, if you were like, name 3 things that you wrote for this, I would, or we shoot you in the head, I'd be like, great, I'm dead. Let's. But I was doing a bunch of, one thing that always winds up happening is when I'm writing something, I wind up like making a character and then playing it somewhere, so I can like start pulling it apart from the inside and figure out like, what do I want to pull further on. And just getting in, I did this same thing with like precogs just when they came out, because I wanted to learn more about precogs. They're my favorite class, I think. That's something about it. No, I don't have any follow-up. Just nanosites are great. I'm sad they're not in 2nd edition yet. Please, Star Chamber. Please give me nanosites. I don't know how. You can ask me to figure out how. I'll make it happen.
Well, yeah, thank you. I literally cannot wait. I spent a minimal amount of time doing some research into this, but I probably spent about 45% of that reading about nanosites. So I was like, this is pretty. So, more general question. Let's pull back a little bit. Obviously, Starfinder, Lancer, we have some relatively popular kind of TTRPGs that exist inside of the sci-fi, sci-fantasy realm. What is your favorite? And is there one that you want to play that you haven't played yet?
Jeremy, you take this one first.
Oh, okay. So, favorite of the ones that I've I mean, I guess it's going to have to be Starfinder, but because I have focused so much on Starfinder and had so much fun with it. But I've played a lot of the other systems. Unfortunately, I still have not had a chance to play Lancer. I'd love to. It looks really fun. Who doesn't love mechs? But just for whatever reason, haven't had the opportunity.
And I've been in like a little bit of a gaming drought, young parent. It's hard to schedule. There was this big thing like 4 years ago where suddenly I wasn't going out as much. I can't remember exactly what it was off the top of my head. And so Starfinder has gotten so much of my attention because I have a full shelf here. All of it. It's a certain sunk cost fallacy. I've been finding myself leaning more into just some of the lighter games, and I'm losing the names off the top of my head, but like something where you're just rolling like a couple of d6 in order to facilitate that sort of storytelling component. I love a good crunchy combat simulator, and what I've found is it's hard to recruit other people into a hard combat simulator, because if they're not already rules people, that's a hard sell. So if I have like creative friends who are more interested in a how do we collaboratively whip something together, even something as simple as like Honey Heist is a blast, and you can start skinning that into any sort of for people who are not familiar with Honey Heist, it's a game where you play bears who are stealing honey. You roll like a couple of d6 at a time, and it's pure silliness. It's just excellent, goofy fun. And it's about the creativity around the table. So I've been playing more of those as like looseners, and when it's crunch time, I'm on like a Discord server with people, and it's Starfinder. So
Sounds similar to it's that game where you play like raccoons and possums and stuff, and you have to steal trash.
excellent.
I don't
Can't
know,
think
but
of
I'd
what it's
love to
called, but
learn
it's
more.
Very
Yeah.
similar game.
It
to
should be
that.
called Trash Finder, though, and if it isn't, then we will make it.
The new
This is-
Pathfinder 2e hack coming 2025. Trash Finder.
Trash.
I think this
I've
is
been
where
wanting.
I
was
was
gonna
going and shouting out the old. I think it was a Pathfinder 1 like homebrew goof off class. It was Knowles with a P, and it was a possum knoll. Anyways,
I believe those
amazing.
are called ant knolls now.
that's true. They're canon. I love Pathfinder.
I mean, if Shumi can be canon, anything can be canon.
Wait, I guess that's my counter question. What is the thing from Pathfinder that you're so excited to throw into space?
Ooh. All right. So for the longest time, I've been like, you know what, the sky cities of Co and stuff like that. Like, there's no reason one of those couldn't have just gone straight up. They're gone now on Age of Lost Omens, so there's no reason why you couldn't just find one floating way out on the edge of the back world system. I'm like, I want to write that someday.
Mine is my pet theory that no one has ever seen Nyarlathotep and Norgorber in the same place. We both have multiple facets, a lot of skullduggery, murder, secrets, various eldritch shit. So there's some part of me that I'm like, Norgorber's gone? Really? Don't believe it.
Goat of 4 faces? I mean, come on.
Why limit yourself to 4 if you're already at 4? I only have 1. If I have 4, I'm gonna be like, what's 6? What's 30?
What's
So-
1,000? Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
So, I'm watching you, Nyarlathotep. I don't believe it.
I got one for you guys that made me think of, actually. And I'm blanking on... The problem is I'm blanking on the name. The god of magic in Starfinder.
Nethys. Sorry, it's a
No, not
stupid
Nethys,
joke on
the one in
our
Starfinder.
podcast
Yeah.
that it is
Yeah.
pronounced
Yeah.
Nethys.
The guy that took over for Nethys in Starfinder, I saw somebody with the stupidest crack theory before, but I love it, and I've accepted it as my own personal canon until it's proven otherwise, is that it's Razmir, and he finally became an actual god, and he is now the god of magic.
That's really good.
I don't know, man. I feel like Razmir is the god of the 3 a.m. infomercial.
Yeah, the multi-level
Yeah.
marketing got, like, literally, you too can become a god. All you have to do is find 10 followers for me,
Yes.
and then we will, yeah.
I think we're just describing Scientology.
Could be.
Trying to think. I did have one other question on. Oh, this is what it was. Of course. One Starfinder or Pathfinder 1E scenario, module, or adventure that you would love, and I mean, yes, I know we can convert, but you would have loved seeing birthed in the 2E rule set.
That's a
Any
tough
of you
one.
played Port Godless?
forgot.
Okay,
this.
so it is set in Rahadum, the no
That's a fun
religion
place.
Yeah.
like nation,
Yep.
and it is a like fort infiltration, and it runs stupid long. It's like 8 hours. It's far too long, and the entire like fortress, you got like a basement level and a main level. You have the infiltration leading up to it. It's all this like really excellent like setup and trying to like leverage your way in. And I think that the combination of like exploration and downtime rules, where so much has now been made explicit, would benefit like a big complicated scenario like that a lot. Lets you streamline things.
Good answer. I also want to look that up because like Rahadum is definitely a very interesting part of like the PF canon.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like Pathfinder Society. I want to say season 5. It's when you're going to war against the World Wound and you're recruiting allies from all around. Who wants to go fight demons? And a bunch of people sign up for some insane reason.
Okay, I got mine. I can't remember what season it was, but it was one of the season specials where you end up going on a comet to rescue one of the elemental gods. And it is just the wildest, wackiest kind of PF1 adventure. And I'm like, I really wish, like, one, to have that in the PF2E system, and two, like, why couldn't that be a Starfinder adventure? Oh my god.
Mhm.
Well, it can now as we share this engine. But yeah, good answers on both of those. I'm kind of curious, does anybody else from the pod have? I know, Jeff, you've waded in a lot of those pools. Anything that you would love to see pulled forward to modernity?
Oh, put me on the spot. I was just enjoying our guests, and now you're wanting me to speak. No, it's fine.
Just say you want to burn down the Black Rose Museum. It's popular.
You know, that place has had just the worst luck. And for such a good guy.
I have an immediate counter reaction.
Oh, can we go the opposite direction and bring Zoe and the Pathfinder?
Let's go
that'd
meet
be
him as a
amazing.
still living human.
I wanted him to be exactly as he is and just have that be like, how are you trying to do reality TV? What's a TV?
Oh, he just plays it totally straight. No one else knows what's going on.
He's got the cameras like Troy and Abed in the morning on Community, but they're not connected to anything.
The very advanced scrying network.
Yes.
I think that's called the Halls of the Living.
In our chat, good friend Sir Newt, he had the thought of seeing Malevolence reskinned to be on like a derelict spaceship. And I think that would be very cool. I don't know if I could top that.
Yeah, Malevolence on the Nostromo would be like really, really cool.
Well, and what that made me think of when I read him saying that is one of the ones that we actually played on the pod because we incorporated it into Iron Gods, Scorpions of Perdition, which is basically aliens, but with Zill. Like, setting something like that on like a space colony would be very fun.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a Legendary Games plugin for the 1E Iron Gods Adventure Path. If you put it in space, it basically is aliens because you've got Zill, which are, they're xenomorphs, literally coming out of the walls and pulling you into the... And it's terrifying,
Yeah,
the whole thing.
It's literally just aliens. It's you go to LV-226 and you fight it's the mining colony and everything. It would be a perfect conversion.
And they lay their babies in you. And you have to deal with that.
Yeah, they crit a halfling of mine. Super dead. Very dead. That's how I found out about massive damage rules in first edition. Like level 1.
Yeah. We had to play that one because they killed the one Zill that Iron Gods gave me too quickly before it got a turn.
Yeah.
So I needed revenge.
Yeah, we killed it in a surprise round, and it was
It
the
was
mini
great.
of the area we were in.
This sounds like an appropriate response.
I haven't traumatized them enough. They didn't give me enough time. Crank the Zill dial to 11.
Yeah. Trying to-
Okay, question for the pod.
Another good question. All right.
What in space would your characters be the most horrified to discover? They've already been traumatized by Numeria, and then they go, "There's fucking more up there."
Now, see, the problem is, I don't know if I can answer. Current character is a spawn of Yogg-Sothoth, so
He's seen it all.
So he's been
I
perfectly
don't
at
think
home.
he'd be
Just
super surprised by anything. Space.
I know
Uh,
for me, at least my first character, I think the existence of the Aslanti Star Empire would just be like the more horrifying than any of the alien races of like, no, why are you just evil space Nazis?
Yeah. No, that's definitely a big one. Like learning, it's like really any character from original Pathfinder, like finding out like, hey, you know this horrible empire that used to exist, and they're, well, no, they do still exist, and they have all these crazy space. It's like, yeah.
You mean
I just
those
think
fuckers
Brixby
are
would be.
giant? Yeah, sorry.
I was gonna say, Brixby would just have a hard time on Akaton, like with all the other Yusoki. I just feel like that would be like, I mean, it's not that different than the Numerian steppes in some ways, but I feel like it would certainly affect his like allergies. Seems very dusty on Akaton.
or he'd have to come to terms with the fact that he might be an alien.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
don't know where Yusoki started. I think that given the book that we're winding down now, any of the characters in it seeing the results of the playtest adventure, A Cosmic Birthday, I think would hit particularly close to home after all this Dominion of the Black kind of mythos adjacent stuff that they've been struggling with for the past 10 months or so.
I was surprised that there was Dominion of the Black stuff in Pathfinder 1E. I had never known before we started playing Book 4 of Iron Gods that wasn't created with Starfinder. Like, I had never realized that was in original Pathfinder.
Oh yeah, from the very beginning.
Yeah.
1E,
Yeah, that's what I
1E,
found out. I'm like, oh yeah, no,
planet
that's
hopping
like
stuff is
a
so
decade
good.
older than I thought it was.
Voice in the Void, I think, is because it was tied into Osirian. It's like the Black Pharaoh and the old pyramids going and gazing at infernal whispers between the stars and putting their brains in jars to keep communing. Yeah, I love it. I think in one of the first, it's either season 1 or 2 of Pathfinder Society. So this is like 2012. 2011, you go to Akaton. You go through a portal, you're flying airships over there, you crash an airship, it's great.
Yeah, it was one of the specials.
Yeah, it's the retirement arc. As of the 12, yeah.
Which secrets we were probably not supposed to reveal, but it's been a long time.
Sorry, the 6-year-old obsolete edition of the game.
Yeah.
For an adventure that is 15 years old. I mean, bury it deep. Bury it deep. But yeah, if you play Eyes of the 12, it's amazing.
Yeah, we're touching a little bit on, obviously we've touched on this a bit, but because we're playing Iron Gods, like the Cthulhian mythos has sort of stepped up in Book 4. Let's see. What if you were to contribute one thing to the cosmic horror of Starfinder or Pathfinder, what would it be?
And I already did a little. So I had something that got a little body horror-y in Drift Crisis. I got to write the artifacts in that one, and there's one in the back that is called the Operator's Shard, and it's a high-level artifact that gives you basically a back door into the Drift, and specifically like some of the Akashic Record stuff, except it does that by like blorbing into your blood, and it might kill you. So it's not like a great way in, unless you survive. But if I was gonna, I mean, I already did the masks of Norgorb or Nyarlathotep. Like, the more of that we get into, the more I'm gonna. I think that's my answer. Or starting to get back into the extraplanar elements, Dimension of Dreams. Let's go there. Let's start seeing. What do people dream about in Starfinder, and how is that a problem?
Yeah, that's actually where I was going. I was like, well, there's the whole Dimension of Dreams thing, which, I mean, you push further out to the edge, you get to Lang, and there's something even beyond that.
Yeah.
And we're given every indication that the Dimension of Dreams is the home dimension to one of the Elder Gods. But with all that said, I think if I was going to contribute something, I would go back to the elemental plane of time, which is actually the home dimension to one of the other Elder Gods.
Okay, incredible answer. I'll just write this down over here in my homebrew.
I think the one thing that you really need, if you're talking about like the Dreamlands, is you need to bring in more cats that can jump to the moon.
Cats from Jupiter. Yeah.
I mean, there is just a dearth in interplanetary cat jumping, and it's a real oversight on Paizo's part. I'm here to call them out on it.
I mean, we stole the rest of Lovecraft's toolkit, didn't we?
Yep.
Yeah.
They're saving that one for number 300, Adventure AP Volume 300.
You heard it here first.
Introducing the cats from Jupiter. So speaking of things like Lovecraftian stuff and things like that, like as far as adding in, or like Scorpions of Perdition kind of being an homage to the Aliens franchise, what is guys' opinion, like as far as like maybe your favorite that you've seen or something that you'd like to do in it, as far as adding in like homages or references to other types of media or other franchises into Starfinder and Pathfinder, like things like tropes that are famous to a genre, or like specific shows or movies or novels famous and like kind of nods to them. So what would be like things like either your favorite that already exists or something that you would like to add in if you could?
I mean, that's tough because we're really not supposed to do that. But
there's a
I mean,
whole section. They make it really explicit.
They do. On the other hand, a lot of people have done it. So I would say you got to tread super careful there. If it's clearly inspired by, but not, directly lifting, work with your developer. Maybe you can make that work. But also, it's best to bring new ideas.
Yeah, I think
So
there's
I
a
guess if
certain
I could
amount of you need to take. You need to like take your homage and twist or flip it somehow so that it is no longer clearly just this one thing, but it could apply to a couple of different things. There was in Starfinder and I'm going to do some very quick research in the feats section. But there was something that I wrote that was so actually I'm gonna go ahead and call out Lock Eyes here, which is one where you basically spend a resolve point to like stare someone down in a single combat, and that was just 100%. I was watching like the old Clone Wars cartoon, and it's Anakin and what's her name just like tearing apart some historic temple, just like staring at each other, super running the whole time. I'm like, this is so cool, and I love this, and like something where you're like, I am so mad at you that if you don't fight me, you're gonna hate it. Was something I was like, I want to put this in. Or I put in the get stabbed through your body but survive it from Our Flag Means Death. Was another one that I was like, I think that this is something flavorful and thematic that everyone should get to do at least once.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, so I have done it once.
Oh.
I will admit. So when I was putting together Skate Finder for the Infinite store, I included a feat called Gleaming the Cube. And it just makes you faster.
I was also I actually looked at the Solar Run Studio blog before we did this, and I was going to mention that I really loved your little piece on Velstrax in space.
Thanks.
You did. Just because we do have chitons, I guess Velstrax FKA chitons in our 1E game, as much as our GM loves to liberally sprinkle them upon us throughout all of the books. But yeah, no, I thought that was kind of in particular when you had sort of touched on the like Verthani augmentation and how that could potentially work inside of that. I don't know. I thought that was a very interesting and salient point that you had touched on. When Jero had brought up other, franchises that you could bring things into, because, Hellraiser in space. Yeah, I'm here for it. I mean, frankly.
Yeah. And like I was gonna say, I guess a better way I could have worded it is like kind of more tropes than specific franchises. I guess would be a better way to say it. Like literally steal something from an existing thing, or even like make too obvious of a reference, but just something like you said, like the stare down. Like another thing I think of is like that's also big in a lot of like old spaghetti westerns, like everybody stare each other down type thing. Like that's something that's not from one specific source, but more like from a genre or from a area of media.
I will say, like, I think in tropes it's hard to find empty space in at least first edition Starfinder, because they are so good at taking the kitchen sink setting and being like, you want to play Starship Troopers, here's Attack of the Swarm. You want to play Hellraiser in space, we're going to do what's Signal of Screams, is that the one?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
You just want like your vanilla deep space adventure, welcome to Dead Suns. You want to go in the sun, that's a different adventure path. Like they're so good at differentiating genre over at Paizo, and that was what made Pathfinder such an excellent setting. And I think when Starfinder, that's turned up to 11, because in Pathfinder, if you want to dig into like your Egyptian like vibes, you go to Osirian and you just sort of tunnel down. While here, if you're like, oh, I want to do cyberpunk, I have all of Aposte just sitting right here, one whole planet to work with. So it gives you a lot of extra wiggle room when you're playing in those tropes and those genres, which I think is such a gift for Starfinder. I don't have any follow-up there. Someone else got to take it.
I had a question, and you kind of led into that a little bit, Jeremy, talking about Skatefinder, but how has the Pathfinder, Starfinder, Infinite existing changed the kind of freelance game, if at all? How has that sort of impacted the space?
That's a good question, and I would say when you mention that, you also have to kind of include the death of Wayfinder, because it's kind of they're two sides of the same thing. Like for a long time, if you wanted to get into the development space, you didn't have experience, Wayfinder was where you went. There was a submission process. So you did have to, build up your writing skills, but it was a way to get your foot in. Definitely the people at Paizo looked at Wayfinder. You could use that as writing credit. So that was kind of your in there. And as Infinite kind of picked up speed, that last issue of Wayfinder kept getting put off, I feel like Infinite kind of took over that space. So if you're trying to break in or you have an idea and you're working on a project and there's not room for it, Infinite's the place to go.
I haven't had a chance to publish an Infinite yet, and I know there's a couple freelancers who like lean heavily into it and are doing a ton of work to just keep their skills up, keep practice, and have that secondary stream of revenue, which I think is awesome for people who want to break into the design space. Because, spoiler alert, this is not where the money is. Just letting anyone who's unaware know. I hope this isn't a surprise to anyone. But like for people who it's about like the love of the game and they want to be contributing to it, Infinite is such a good resource. There's a couple of Discords that are very active in helping foster other people and get like involved. And I'll also say, with an extra shout out to Solo Run, that sometimes just like you can make a blog too. I submitted to Wayfinder a couple of times. I submitted to RPG Superstar a couple of times and never like quite broke through. And what did it for me was they couldn't stop me from just putting it on a blog. And sooner or later it got to a point where people noticed. So Infinite is another avenue for you to get your name out there, but as long as you're doing the work and you're putting it somewhere and you're pointing people towards it, the Paizo staff are people who really like to see what their fans are doing and see what especially the super fans who start to get into the game and make it themselves and see what they're doing. So if you put it out there and you tag people and you interact, you can turn heads. So, whether it's on Infinite or not.
I think part of what makes Infinite also like a cool resource is there's a community that's built up around making stuff for Infinite. There's a lot of people who are willing to help.
Yes.
And like there are a lot of resources available to like I know like I was making one of the first Brian Identity adventure that we did. I was like, I want to publish this as an adventure on Pathfinder Infinite. I don't know what I'm doing. I went on the Discord server for Pathfinder Infinite. I got templates and I got help with formatting. I got advice, and they pointed me to Affinity Publisher, which is a lot better than Microsoft Word for making a PDF look nice. Just a little hint there, and like how to get all the little icons to work right and everything. And it's just like it's a really supportive community. And then there are a lot of smaller third-party developers also that you can build relationships with people, and like that's the kind of thing that can also lead to and talking to the people at Paizo, because they're in those Discords too.
Well, and that's why we love the system, because like Dragon Magazine. Right? Like we love this system because this system is an expression of people that care deeply about this world, but also have had fan contributions that have grown it and ultimately created a whole separate thing. For folks that are watching or listening that are not familiar with that reference, that is one of the magazine's Dungeon and Dragon that existed in like the intervening time till like I think 2007. I can't totally remember off the top of my head. That a lot of the folks that are involved in Pathfinder were also involved in Dragon. So yeah, no, I think that like, and what made me originally think about this was Jeremy referencing Wayfinder, and then now how we talk about Infinite is that something that is really enjoyable about this community is that it has always been crowdsourced. It's always had sort of a kind of, our fork from 3.5 in that way. And I think that like how we lovingly maintain that as a community is something that really defines Pathfinder, because there was a lot of things that split off from the original TSR, but it's really just Pathfinder that has held on in the way that it's established itself. So it's good to hear that same kind of populist spirit exists inside of Pathfinder Infinite, just because Dragon to Wayfinder to that community production is what keeps what we all do so fun and so fresh.
And for those of you who didn't understand the reference, magazines are kind of like books, but they were made out of paper, and you would get them in this thing called a mailbox that would sit outside.
Or you could buy them at Borders, another artifact of the Path.
Thousands of years ago.
Indeed.
There were stores.
All of chat is like, does Paizo only like hire precogs as freelancers? They're from some other time.
Yeah, go back and look at some of the authors on Dungeon and Dragon sometime. There are big names back there.
Right. Absolutely.
I love finding like popular authors who have like written credits out there. Like Chuck Wendig, if anyone's familiar, has like Vampire the Masquerade credits buried back in the 90s. Stumbled across that and I was like, "Whoo, that's fun."
You don't even have to go that far back. I just was talking on Discord with someone about it is China Mivel. I never know how to pronounce his last name, but he wrote like background fluff for Pathfinder, which I had never known. I've read like 4 of his books, and I never knew that he did that. But like he wrote like something, I think it was for like the Inner Sea Guide or something like I never knew that.
I mean, on the one hand, I'm surprised, but on the other hand, not really.
Yeah, you're losing me to Pathfinder Wiki right now. I'm doing a deep dive. That's amazing. I'm also going to take this second to pull out one of the other Starfinder authors, that James Sutter. People are familiar. I had a really great opportunity via Cat Rambo. Does some like writing classes, and James Sutter taught like a 2-session class on world building. That was so.
Nice.
A couple other authors will just use the term Sutterisms when they're talking about their writing, which is very specifically the art of writing like a 2 or 3 word hook for yourself for later. So when you're talking about like, yes, the planet of XL17 with its amphibious carnivorous kelp. And you never mention that again until you go back and you go, okay, what the hell does carnivorous kelp do? Like, what am I working with here? But just giving yourself the gift of take a couple of different ideas, just wed the words together, and then go and start to figure out how does that work and build out from those surprising connections was just like a great way to spend like a couple of hours thinking about creative writing with someone who has contributed so much to Pathfinder and Starfinder, and you can kind of see places that he did that within the setting and how then other authors take it, and you just get the beautiful weird stuff that makes us love this world.
Sutter's book for Second Darkness, Children of the Void, was like one of the first ones that I think started to flesh out more of that like planetary system. The back matter in that book is super interesting for sure. That is one of my like grail APs that I still haven't gotten to play yet. I really want to play Second Darkness with somebody yet. We do have some friends that do play it though. We should probably.
Sutter's also the chief author on Distant Worlds.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
No, I can definitely see that.
Which, if you didn't know, is the foundational document for basically all of the Pact Worlds.
I have referenced Distant Worlds writing Starfinder. I love going back to first edition stuff and being like, okay, well, this is getting hooked in now. It's a particular weakness of mine.
I think that goes back to the GM spirit, is that like we asked the question kind of earlier in this about like what's good advice to give to GMs, is like, don't be afraid to let something that you yourself didn't actually set up be preparation for something else. Like, don't be afraid to like look back, find something that your players gave like an inordinate amount of credence to, and use that as a hook, even though you didn't build that yourself. Don't be afraid to draw on things that existed before. You don't have to think out that like crazy plot hook that happens in book 5 or book 6. Sometimes those seeds get planted elsewhere. So always very cool to hear that.
Did anyone think of a time that they did this at a table that was particularly effective? I have one that I can share while people are brainstorming. I had a player who made a druid who was just the most disgusting little guy. Would just keep a bag that he would collect bugs in. This is a trait that I have now incorporated in multiple other characters because I loved it so much. But he got a bag that would let him like draw vermin and throw them. and one of the giant centipedes got out and ran away, and he was so distraught that then we spent the next session going on a whole centaquest for him to track down and find this giant centipede that he had decided he had a deep spiritual connection with. And it was such a good session. I was just like, all right, here's a couple of mites. You guys are going in a cave, have a terrible time. And they did, and it was great. And all I did was just go, fine, you weirdos, here's your natural consequences. And there's something powerful to that, and I think that's one of the best ways to play these games.
Mhm.
I had a similar one. I had when I was GMing Skull and Shackles, there may be at some time a regatta or boat race that may occur at one point, but my players may have gotten obsessed with the Eye of Abendego when I had started kind of like weaving things in, and we spent the time that should have been spent at the regatta going through the platforms of the Eye of Abendego and the kind of storm giants in there. It was not something that I had planned on writing at all, but it's interesting, like when you kind of give, like you had described before, that like the Sutterism, the reference to something that has almost an infinite depth if you want to touch on it over and over and over again, because it just like blossoms into like, oh, the carnivorous kelp that is sustained by this sort of environment, you know what I mean, that leads to the world building that both of you are so good at. It is, it's always interesting when you do have that sort of bi-directional relationship with your players, where they can also really tell you what is the focus of the AP, and sometimes it's not what's in the book. So
Skulls and Shackles is a particularly good one for going off rails too. I did that when I played that too.
I ran before. I work at a library, and I ran a D&D 5e group for team patrons, and we went through Storm King's Thunder, and which is a fun little one. It's not the best written, but there is a little throwaway line in this city that you're protecting from a giant attack. There's a character in it that's a treant, and it's mentioned in like the little flavor text form, and I mentioned it because I read it off to the players that like, oh, he was created like a century ago by a like elven druid, and that's the whole thing. There's no information given anywhere else in the book, any kind of back matter, anything on this character. But for whatever reason, like two of these kids were obsessed with finding the person that created this treant and like reuniting the two. So I ended up writing them in like as a character later in the adventure as like just a little side thing for them to do. Like, oh, hey, by the way, this person you found is the druid that originally created this treant. Like you found him, like you can have this touching reunion. But it literally just came out of like a single line of flavor text that whoever wrote it clearly didn't intend to be anything.
Yeah.
So I've got two stories for mine. One is when I ran Dead Sons, I had one player who was really into apostate and drow, or well, we're calling them something different now, but void elves, we'll say. They were really into that, and I was like, well, I want to, encourage them to engage with the setting. So I ended up replacing the Cult of the Devourer in that AP entirely with void elf houses and apostate, and ended up basically rewriting about a significant portion of the whole AP just to make that work. Yeah. But I mean, I think they had fun with it. They, starting from the second book on, they had an ongoing legal case against one of the Void Elf houses that didn't get resolved until the end of the AP. So it was rewarding. And it was, they did engage with the setting. So I feel like that was rewarding for everyone involved. And then, of course, the other story I have is one of those that's like, it's kind of the first time that you hear about it even happening. There was this campaign, and all of the players were trying to fight against this vampire, but they lost. But rather than getting killed by the vampire enslaves them and starts making them go do quests. And of course, that campaign ended up turning into Rise of the Rune Lords.
All right, that's
a couple
that's
of
pretty
thralls and
amazing.
Sandpoint.
Exactly.
That's excellent.
Well, all right. I guess we are hitting the end of our block of your valuable time that you've granted to us and our listeners. Please, we won't have the guests do this first. I'm going to make Jero do this first, and then we'll just go around. Please complete the sentence. Is the last thing that we do. In space, no one can hear you.
I mean, I'm going to take the lazy way out as somebody who watched the first 3 Alien movies at an extremely too young age and just say scream.
Jeff.
Beatbox.
That was just sad.
All right, Sam, let's be nice to our guests. Let's make them go last.
In space, no one can hear you. Pound 30 goo tubes.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a John Carpenter turn. In space, no one can hear you chew bubblegum.
Well, in space, no one can hear you.
Exactly.
It
That's
is-
my answer. Oh,
Did you, that can't. It,
man after my own heart. Indeed. Yeah.
That is
Just
much funnier than what I
underline.
thought you were doing. I thought you were self-censoring kick-ass.
no, if I do that, I'll usually make the bleep sound. You'll know.
Yeah. No, that
Jeremy,
was much smarter. That was
John,
much fun.
thank you both for coming
Thank
to
you so much for having us.
this
Yeah, thanks for
digital
having us.
gathering.
Good luck against the machines.
Thank you.
Stay
Is there
strong.
anything? What should we be looking out for either of you in the future? Last moment of this ephemeral time to plug yourself to the vulnerable ears of our listeners.
Starfinder Facts is still limping along. There are sometimes new tweets. A lot of the times it's bringing back the old ones, but I'm hoping somehow, maybe through cloning, to have enough time to fire up the blog again, start bringing back some of the old hits to second edition. So really looking forward to the new playtest. It's been giving me a lot of energy, so hoping to bring some of that back.
Get that baby typing. They're
I
like
know,
probably
right?
close to being able to do that work for you now, right?
If like a monkey
I don't know
can
anything
make
about
Shakespeare like with
Mhm.
enough
Yeah.
time, a baby's smarter than a monkey eventually.
Exactly.
15 months, 15 words per minute, easy.
Yeah, given infinite babies, you could make infinite Starfinder products.
I'll bring that
Can
up with
make
my wife. I don't know how
Pathfinder, yeah.
easy that's going to be to sell, though.
For my part, of course, as was mentioned, the blog Solar Run Studio.
The excellent Solo Run Studios.
Thank you. We'll continue to be doing Starfinder 2e playtest material for that, basically up until launch. I mean, I'm sure after launch as well, but then it will be official material. Other than that, there's a whole bunch of stuff that obviously I can't talk about. But as I started out with, what has been announced, Battlecry coming out next year. Look for it.
So excited for that one. As someone that remembers the Warlord from 4th edition, I am excited to
Yes.
see what exists inside of that. That is for the real creaky oldsters out there who enjoyed 4E. Anyway.
The miniature handbook.
Must be nice to be able to talk about things that you've done for Paizo. I'm a little bit newer to the freelancing game, so the stuff that I have done, I am not allowed to talk about any of it.
Yeah, there's going to be a long period of that.
So you just gotta like take that selective amnesia by Gen Con at the latest, I think. Hopefully PaizoCon. Lots of fun stuff to talk about soon.
Well, thank you both again for stopping by.
Thank you so much for having
Yeah,
us.
thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Great.
Machine learning. Kill command received. Terminated.
Did we tweet out again, or not tweet? The Blue Sky version of tweet out again that we're doing the part that people might actually want to watch now.
I believe it's
Um,
bloop. I think that's the operative verb.
We bloop it out.
No, that's a sea monster.
No,
Thank
thank you. This is great.
Yeah, thank you.
You both were wonderful. It was really, really great to talk to both of you, honestly. Very,
Mhm.
very interesting guests.
No.
So thank you.
Thank you. And
Happy to help.
give us a couple more months, and it'll be so much more interesting because we can talk about all the stuff we're not allowed to talk about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Secrets.
Well, there's so many things I want to talk about right now.
So many.
Yeah.
Like putting my whole fist in my mouth.